Stan, we're live.
And welcome everyone to another edition of In the Dugout. Good afternoon. I am your host, Mike Stenhouse. Apologize for a little bit of a late start and for some of the noise. Having some technical issues. I'm still not sure we resolved them. I'm not seeing us live on YouTube. Larry the Liberty Guy, can you confirm?
I can confirm, Stan. Technical issues resolved. We are live.
All right. Not showing up on my end, but that probably has to do with something with me. All right. Thanks. Welcome on this post-Easter show of In the Dugout. You know, it's a sad In the Dugout, as we're going to talk about later today. And the Dugout's got a baseball theme. You know, recognizing and kind of playing on my past experience as a professional Major League player. But Major League Baseball has really done a disservice, I think, to its fans, to America, to the game. And we'll talk about that in a minute. We'll talk about how Major League Baseball ruined my Good Friday and my year, probably. We're going to have a special guest, and it's all because of what our special guest is going to talk about, which is the election integrity law that was passed in Georgia that the left is going absolutely berserk over, and that so many corporations and CEOs are apparently ignorantly supporting the left's calls. You know, I don't understand it. We'll talk about that with our special guest from my counterpart. You know, our think tank, our Center for Freedom and Prosperity, is part of a national network of state-based think tanks. And this is the VP of Public Policy will be our guest. He's from Georgia, from our counterpart in Georgia. So he will join us later today after my comments on that and a few other miscellaneous. And then at the end of the show, I'm going to talk about the hearing that our center provided testimony at yesterday. A Senate Oversight Hearing Committee was looking at the executive orders. You know, were there any, you know, that have been issued under the emergency status by the governor, both Raimondo and McKee, over the last 13 months or so? And were there any issues there? And I'll talk to you about our testimony. And I will talk to you about how I called out a senator for an absurd remark by a sitting elected senator, and how he then doubled down on that after my admonition. So we'll talk about that hearing and that appalling. I was in our media release. I said I was appalled at his statement, and I was, and I am, and I'm doubly appalled at his doubling down on it. So we'll get into that after our guest today. Tomorrow's show, again, two more big guests. We're gonna have a group of parents from the North Kingston and South County area who are outraged and very concerned about their kids who are being forced to take experimental COVID tests multiple times a week before they can keep participating in school sports. They're outraged. They're concerned. You'll hear from them tomorrow. And then in the bottom of the hour, another one of my colleagues, this one from Colorado, my counterpart in Colorado, one of the most senior members of our think tank movement. He lives and just miles away or a mile away and regularly frequents the grocery store where the Colorado shootings took place. He's also got lawsuits as a plaintiff, defending Second Amendment rights. So we're going to talk to him tomorrow in the bottom of the hour about both of those issues. today. So moving on into batting practice, some quick hits before and some commentary before we get into our guest, who I see is with us, but we'll ask him to stay in the background for about another 5 or 6 minutes or so. First of all, I'm glad Gonzaga lost. Now, last night in the NCAA championship game, and you want to know why? It's for absolute petty reasons. But hey, we're petty people, right? If anything. When I was a freshman at Harvard, as a freshman, believe it or not, I was second in the country in Division I batting average as a baseball player. I have 475. But some jerk from Gonzaga hit 480. A guy never made it. But how dare some guy from Gonzaga hit higher than 475 and rob me of that? No, but seriously, I've always had this little thing for Gonzaga. It's all in fun, and of course I appreciate great achievement and great competition, and I congratulate that guy for having what an unbelievable year. My year was totally lucky. I went something like 20 from my last 32, and I think 10 of those hits were like just bloopers. But it was I finished like 20 from my last 30, and like I said, 10 of them were just balls that just found the holes, and it just my average just shot up like that. Okay, on other issues we've been covering, the State House, a big day today up at the State House for 2 reasons. Well, all kinds of reasons today. Is important bills being heard. We can't get into all the reasons. But the bills we've been following, the Act on Climate bills, are both scheduled for final votes today in the House and the Senate, which would then send this horrible bill to the governor's desk. Governor McKee seems to be hinting that he's not going to sign them. In fact, he may veto them, we hope. We call these bills Rhode Island's Green New Deal bills. And because he's objecting ostensibly on the legal enforcement provisions in the legislation. And if he sends them back and asks to remove that probably will cause enough dissension in the 2 bodies where they could never agree on how to move forward. So that is our hope. If he doesn't sign it, it becomes law in 10 days once it hits his desk. If he does sign it, it becomes law when he signs it. If he vetoes it, we'll see if the General Assembly. But let me tell you what, folks, we expect both chambers to pass the bills today. There is, if the governor had threatened to veto, he might have been able to flip some votes in the Senate and the House, but he's a political coward right now. He's brand new. He's only, 2 month old. And he's playing everything very carefully. Doesn't want to upset the left right now. We know he's not a socialist, but he is being heavily influenced by the socialist left. So we'll see what he does. A lot of business groups are putting pressure on him, and we're going to take some credit for that. A couple of weeks ago, we reached out to coalition groups to sign a coalition letter that we put together. The truth of it is, again, these business groups are cowards. They see us as too controversial, too much of a hot rail to ever sign on to a letter. But we did spur them to say, but you know what? We're going to get with some of our other friends, and we're going to reach out to the governor's office, and we're going to make some hay privately or publicly on our own. So it was our reaching out to them. And here's one of the articles that's talking about that in Go Local Prov. Business leaders, they're saying they support a compromise. That compromise technically would be to remove the legal enforcement clauses of this bill. But I think it's going to be enough to kill it. I think this is just the cover. And here you see a list of the groups that signed on. And I can tell you, I talked to this gentleman personally. I talked to this person personally. I talked to somebody from this organization personally. I talked to this person personally, and they all agreed to get together. And you can see they did get together, and they have pushed back against this horrid bill in Rhode Island. So again, our center is leading the way on this, as we always do. And I just wanted you as our supporters to be aware of what we've been doing. All right, it's also a big day up on up on Smith Hill today. The House caucus, the Republican caucus, is holding a little rally of sorts, protesting basically Rhode Island's version of H.R. 1, which is the awful federal bill in Congress that would overturn and federalize election processes instead of leaving it up to the states. And our guest is going to talk about what their state in Georgia did. But I wanted to let you know, so I'm sort of leading up to our guest here. But there is that bill. There's a little rally today at the State House. It's probably ongoing right now. It was scheduled to start at 3:15. I know it was a little late last I checked into it. And we're going to talk about some of the concerns they have with our state election law, which are exactly opposite pretty much what Georgia just did. And we're going to talk about that with our guest in just a few minutes. But before I get to a guest, just one more thing. I was having a good Friday. I go through my normal Good Friday after, ritual. We shut down at noon. I'm a Catholic. I won't tell you what my ritual is, but I went through my whole ritual on Good Friday, in my privacy, and I turned on the Red Sox game. It was a home opener. It was the first game of the year, and I was enjoying. After I was enjoying the game, even though they were losing 3-0. It was the top of the 7th, and then the announcers say, "Oh, we have news from New York and Major League Baseball that because of their protests of the baseball game, of the Georgia laws, that baseball is removing the All-Star game from Georgia." So here's what I tweeted about 2 minutes later, and it's true. I turned off the game. And I doubt I will turn it on again this year. I don't know about ever or not. I won't say that yet, but I doubt I'll do it again. It ruined my Good Friday, which is a somber event anyway. It was made extra somber. So now we have the Biden Baseball League. Whatever Joe Biden wants, Major League Baseball is going to do. Whatever the woke crowd wants, Joe Biden's going to do. Therefore, Major League Baseball is going to do. So it really should be the woke baseball league, but this is an opinion piece from the Wall Street Journal calling it the Biden Baseball League. And as we're going to talk about with our guest, Joe Biden, the president of the United States, outwardly, factually, blatantly, no nuanced stuff like they used to accuse Trump of, no assumed, interpreted. He flat out lied about what this law is about, and I'm sure our guest is going to agree. So here's a little funny that I like to show some funnies about Major League Baseball. The people talking about how racist it is, show an ID, and there they have to show an ID to get their tickets at the will call window. Isn't that always the case? So let's, earlier this year, I had a commentary on this very show I called it What the Hell is Going On Out There, where I talked about all these institutions from, it started with Hollywood, of course, and then academia, and then political bodies, and even cities. Cities have become nothing but political animals. K through 12 education, the corporate media, big tech, big business, and now sports leagues. They've all become completely politicized. Shut up and play ball. Ann Coulter, right? Was it Shut Up and Sing? Is that her Hollywood thing? What the hell is going on out there? Is there no escape from politics and wokeness anywhere? The only thing I watch now is golf. They don't do it. They're not doing it. I watch golf. It's the only thing I watch right now, sports-wise. All right, let's bring on our guest, and I want to thank him for waiting. Buzz Brockway. Buzz, welcome to In the Dugout. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks very much. Thanks for having me on.
All right, so before we even get into your credentials and all that, so this hurts for me to put on, I played for the Red Sox. I'm putting on my Red Sox cap. I see you have what cap on?
Atlanta Braves. I'm still Still love the Braves. It's not their fault all this stuff happened, but still love the Braves.
Well, I can't wear this cap in good faith anymore, so I'm taking it off. In fact, I'm going to fold it up so I can store it. And do you know how to properly store a baseball cap, Buzz?
No.
Yeah, you turn it inside out like this. No, I can't undo it. You take the cap, you fold up the brim against the front, and then you fold the back over, and it keeps the brim.
Okay.
And you can pack it in your bag, and it keeps the brim nice and stiff. So I'm folding
All
that
right.
up. I'm going to put on my AAA Red Sox, the Pawtucket
Red
Sox, who are no longer here. So the Boston Red Sox are, to me, how do they used to do? What was that? The Jewish thing? They tear their clothes when you're dead to me. And the Pawtucket Red Sox are literally dead to everybody in this state because they've moved to Massachusetts because our lawmakers let them get away. So anyway, I'm not too happy with professional baseball right now, but you are the vice president of public policy at our counterpart in Georgia, the Georgia Center for Opportunity. How long you been with the center in Georgia?
Almost coming up on 2 years.
I was a former state legislature, right?
Yes.
Lawmaker.
And I was crazy enough to actually think I wanted to run elections in Georgia, so I ran for Secretary of State. So.
Oh, really? Okay. So yeah, reading here, you were 8 years in the Georgia House. Mm-hmm. You served on committees that included government affairs, and you worked a lot on, it says here, election law.
Yeah.
All right. So, I got to ask you one obvious question. Buzz Brockway.
Yeah.
Any relation to Lightyear?
Oh, well, yeah. That rumor's out there, and I can neither confirm nor deny that. So we'll have to launch an investigation to see what happened there.
Okay. All right. Listen. Let's just have a back and forth. What the hell's going on in Georgia? What's going on?
Yeah. So I mean, look, as your viewers will know, Georgia wound up being, a focal point, maybe not the only focal point, but sure a very high priority focal point for former President Trump and his team, as they were working every legal angle they could possibly think of to try to, well, I won't make any accusations, but just, they're trying to win. And so they were trying to win. So they did all sorts of stuff here in Georgia. And unfortunately for him, it's just the votes weren't here. However, as you know, there are large numbers of Republicans who think that, weird stuff happened in the election and maybe even fraudulent stuff happened. And so legislators responded. And what they ended up, there might have been close to 90 bills introduced in the Georgia legislature this year. Our session runs from January and normally ends in March. And so there were bills, not all of them were Republican bills. There were Democrats introducing bills as well. But what they ended up with was the House had its omnibus bill. The Senate Republicans had their omnibus bill, included a number of things. And they wound up with.
And first of all, the Republicans own clear majorities in both chambers?
Yes. In both chambers. And we have a Republican governor.
Yep.
So the leaders of those bodies and the governor, the speaker and the lieutenant governor who presides over the Senate and the governor had all said, we're going to take a hard look at all this stuff, all election laws, everything was on the table. But what those three gentlemen said was they did not want to roll back or change Georgia's no excuse absentee. So that was kind of the only thing that was off the table. But there were a lot of stuff. And so what they wound up with was the bill that passed, Senate Bill 202. And as you mentioned, President Biden has had some things to say about that. Got a 4 Pinocchios from the Washington Post for one comment. And there's a lot of comment. But what's interesting now to me is now national media is starting to actually read the bill.
Yeah.
And they're realizing that some of the early claims were not what they were led to believe. And the bill is not nearly as offensive as national media was led to believe early on.
All right, so let me ask this. So back when the bill was being debated and voted on in committee and on the floor, if that's the terminology you use, it's terminology we use here. Was it as controversial as it's been spun to be at the time?
There were some things in there that were, that were kind of controversial. The Senate did end up voting to eliminate no excuse absentee voting, and so it would have moved it back to what the law in Georgia was maybe in the early 2000s, where you had to be over a certain age and you had to have certain other conditions before you could be allowed to vote by absentee. And then something that's kind of a newer development in Georgia is Sunday voting.
Yeah,
and
you added that, right?
Yeah, so that, and it was unclear in the law previously. So it's sort of the bill we wound up with. You're right; it allowed it, and allowed 2 days two Sundays of Sunday voting. An earlier, excuse me, an earlier version of the House bill would have outlawed all Sunday voting. So I think some of what the reaction that you see in national media is they're reacting to other proposals and previous bills that had passed.
Not the actual bill. All right, let me break it down quickly just to set it up. So I didn't read the bill. I'm going based on news reports from what I think are trusted sources. But anyway, so as far as in-person voting goes, it appears that the bill expanded opportunities to vote in person. Is that true?
It is.
All right. And
Georgia,
you had okay.
So what it did was it added, we had essentially 3 weeks, weeks of early voting, Monday through Friday, one mandatory Saturday. So the bill expanded it. Now there are 2 mandatory Saturdays and 2 optional Sundays.
And the voting hours that was a lie about closing at 5 o'clock. That was just some standard language, how to define an average working day. But every county has the option to extend that to 7 o'clock if they choose, right?
That's true. Yep.
All right, so you're expanding the number of days that are available for early voting, and you've not done anything to change the hours available to vote, correct?
Correct. Yep.
All right. Now on mail-in voting before this bill, that's really what this is. Well, first of all, you had voter ID before, and you still have voter ID now for in-person voting?
Yes.
No changes there, right?
Correct.
All right. So that was always the case. So when Major League Baseball selected Atlanta, you had voter ID, right? That's nothing new, right?
That's nothing new.
Okay. All right. Now, mail balloting.
Right.
We too used to provide a reason why you couldn't vote in person. I'm still puzzled as to why, if you have 3 weeks or 17 days of early voting, why anybody needs an excuse for a mail-in ballot. But before this bill, you had no excuse mail ballot voting if you were eligible, and
Correct.
After the bill, you have no excuse mail ballot voting. Correct?
Correct. Yes.
All right. I don't know the answer to this. Prior to this legislation, were mail ballots mailed out automatically to everybody, or applications, I should say, or were only upon proactive request by the voter?
Only upon proactive request from the voter, with this one exception. During our primary elections in May of 2020, the Secretary of State in Georgia decided to mail every registered voter, approximately 6 million people, an application. The thinking was the more people that vote by mail, the less people are going to stand in line at the polls and the less chance of the COVID virus spreading.
Yep.
So that was the only time that happened.
But not in the general election.
Correct.
They had to proactively go online or do something, right?
Now, there is a provision in Georgia law. So if you vote in a primary absentee and you're, forget all the parameters, but essentially if you're elderly, there's a couple of conditions where you can check a box that says then from every future election, you will automatically be sent an absentee ballot.
Okay.
So that, and to look, just to be honest, Stacey Abrams and the Democrats were very skillful. They encouraged their folks to do that. And as a result, around 650,000 people in our Senate runoffs.
Has that been changed? Has that part of the law been changed with this new bill?
No.
So if you so once you apply for an absentee ballot, you still have to apply for an absentee ballot after the law?
Yes.
Unless you're one of those.
No, you still have to apply. And what this box does is say, if you vote in the first election in a cycle, say a primary election,
just for that cycle.
Yes.
Okay, you don't have to apply again. Okay.
Right.
Good. All right. So for the next election, so again, the law hasn't changed. You still have to proactively apply, right. For a mail ballot. Okay, for the first time in that cycle. All right. The difference, as I understand it, is what were the rules before on providing some kind of validation for mail ballots, whether it was a notary, witness signatures on ID? What is the law now after the legislation?
So prior to the passage of this bill, if you
does the bill have a name?
It's called the Election Integrity Act of 2021.
Okay, good name.
Yes. Senate Bill 202 in Georgia. So before the passage of this bill, if you wanted an absentee ballot, you provided a signature. And the signature ostensibly is supposed to match the signature on your driver's license or a signature that you have on file with your elections office.
Your voter registration.
They match it. Yeah. They attempt
visually
to match
or by machine?
Manually.
Manually. Okay.
Yep. And so after the passage of this law, they changed it to now to what some other states do. You need to provide a number, either your driver's license number, and then there's a handful of other forms of identification that you can use, essentially the same ID that you're allowed to use when you come to the polls. So it could be a passport. If you're a member of the military, your military ID, for example.
So some government issued ID number. Yep.
So now you have to put that on your
in addition to the signatures?
No, just I don't know, but the signature is not what they're going to check. What they're going to check is that ID number.
So in this past election, just to be clear, for anyone submitting an absentee ballot, they had to get one or two witness signatures.
No witnesses. Just
your own signature.
Your own signature.
Okay.
And they're going to match it to the signature they have on file.
Okay. In Rhode Island, we used to have your signature plus either two witness signatures or a notary stamp.
Yeah.
And we did away with that this year through a consent decree, through judicial action, which was not supposed to happen that way.
Right.
All right, but was the only the signature, I'm talking last year now, last election, was only the signature a result of a consent decree that Stacey Abrams and worked out with Raffensperger?
No, not that aspect of it. What
did they do?
The consent decree that caused such controversy revolved around how a signature would be rejected. Before the consent decree, you have trained elections workers who have been trained by the Georgia Bureau of Investigations on how the techniques they use to match signatures. So what's supposed to happen? We got 159 counties. How this was applied, who knows? But that's what's supposed to happen. You train these folks, and then they compare the signature. And if they think that the signature is invalid, then they set it aside. The voter has the opportunity to cure that. In other words, they would contact them and say, hey, we got a problem here. And they could come and they could, appear in person and prove that they are who they are and get their ballot. What changed under the consent decree was if one of these workers checked something and had some suspicions, then a 3-person panel was formed to look at that. And they would have, and as long as 2 of the 3 agreed that the signature matched, it would then be approved. And if it's rejected, same procedure applies. The voter has the opportunity to cure it.
All right. So we're talking with Buzz Brockway, Vice President of Public Policy at the Georgia Center for Opportunity, about the truth about the Georgia election bill that has caused such controversy across the country. We're trying to find out what has material changed. So now we found one material change, is that on absentee ballots, instead of a signature match, they're going to look for you to provide an ID on whatever government issued identification you have, right? Is that a fair way to say it?
Yep, it is.
What else material change from ballot harvesting to drop boxes? What other material changes were there in the law?
Well, I mean, there's a lot, and most of them are not controversial. Some of them actually were items that were, in bills that passed with Democrat support.
What were the controversial items?
The controversial ones, we mentioned the one, and Democrats don't like the voter ID proponent, as they feel like there are people who can't easily obtain an ID, and you're throwing up a barrier to their voting. The other one
have they ever identified someone who doesn't have an ID and couldn't vote?
Well, going back to when Georgia first passed the voter ID for in-person voting, there were lawsuits. It wound its way all the way to the Supreme Court, and the U.S. Supreme Court upheld Georgia's how Georgia was going about this. Georgia then and still provides free identification. So if you look, I mean, and who normally gets this? Elderly folks who no longer drive, who don't have a need for a driver's license. They're the ones who mostly do this. They can get a free state issued ID. It looks, very similar to a driver's license, but it makes it plain. It's just a form of ID that's provided free. And in the past, we've had secretaries of state who have, had a bus that drives around in communities where Democrats say nobody has an ID, and attempted to, provide everybody this free ID, and, had a small number of people take advantage of it. So, I mean, we're in the modern world. Almost everybody has an ID. Oh, and one other thing I should mention.
Right. Okay.
If you do, under Georgia's new law, if you do not have any of these forms of identification then you can include the last 4 digits of your social security number. So it really whittles it down to who.
Under the new law?
Under the new law. Yeah.
Okay. All right.
So if you're a person who has no forms of identification and doesn't have a social security number, and my guess is you're highly unlikely to be a citizen of the United States and eligible to vote anyway.
All right. Can I ask you? Can I ask you something on this?
Yeah.
Isn't it demeaning? Isn't it, to use the term of the year, isn't it racist in of itself to suggest that large groups of low-income people don't have the capacity to obtain an ID or to read the ID number off their card and put it on a mail ballot? I mean, is that not demeaning and insulting in itself?
I would tend to think it is. And I think, and this is why in February, the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, the big paper here in Georgia, took a poll. 73% of voters all across the political spectrum supported the idea of adding this requirement that folks had to list their ID when obtaining an absentee ballot. It enjoys broad bipartisan support. So
it's really just basic common sense. And to think that some people aren't able to do something as simple as that is, to me, I just don't understand how they get away with making those claims. All right, let's go back to other material changes quickly. Just quickly. So I got a few more things I want to cover with you.
Yeah, absolutely. Maybe the most controversial one, well, two quick ones. Number one, and honestly, this rubs me wrong a little bit. They removed the Secretary of State from previously he was chair of the state elections board. They've removed him from that position, and they're going to install a new person that the legislature will pick to be in that position. They gave that
won't interrupt anybody's ability to vote, though, right?
No, it won't. But it seems vindictive. So,
okay, got it.
And then
all right, let's stop on that 1 second. Just quickly, what's the truth about this Raffensperger, or however you say his name? Is he, we hear so many different things about this guy. What's the truth about him?
Well, look, I served in the legislature with him. I consider him a friend. he and I both ran for Secretary of State. Obviously, he won and I didn't. So he's an engineer by trade. He's a very smart man. He's run he built a successful large company. I think for the most part he's done a really good job, and he's tried very carefully to resist calls from the left and the right, to do various things that he would consider to be partisan, because he views the job as Secretary of State. You're trying to make the elections fair for everybody.
All right. So you want to give him the benefit of the doubt. And we should okay. Go on. Next, the last controversial thing with the bill.
Last controversial thing is about the distribution of water and food.
Oh yeah.
What the bill really says is that those sorts of things cannot happen within 150 feet from the polling place. It just makes it clear that in under Georgia law now, handing those things out could be considered an attempt to influence a voter. Now, people can still, first of all, they can bring their own water and snacks to a polling place. And second of all, they can donate it to the polling managers, or polling managers can provide it themselves and have self-serve food and water. So if you want a food truck, and we had that, there were lots of food trucks around polling places in and around Atlanta in the last election. You can still do that, just outside 150 feet from the polling place.
So the only thing that can't happen is people associated with a campaign or otherwise trying to electioneer or influence a vote. Only those people within a certain limited distance can't give you any food, beverage, or other gift. Clothing, T-shirts, anything of that.
And there are a couple of cases of state legislators, these are just allegedly, handing out pizza and so forth to voters in line where they're on the ballot. Some of them wearing their own campaign T-shirts.
So there is a history. There is a history of this kind of shenanigans going on.
Yep, and some of those have been turned over to our Attorney General to take a look at and see if it's.
So there was a reason for that bill, and it was a valid reason. All right. So because of those, what I consider virtually insignificant changes.
Yeah.
And I think you would agree with me. The goal should be to make it easy to vote, but hard to cheat, right? That's a pretty simple, that's a pretty safe premise. So because you did that, you kept it easy to vote.
Yeah.
You might have made it a little harder to cheat on mail ballots, hopefully. Because of that, we're getting this.
Yeah.
Now, I know there's been reports about moving the game to Denver, but it's really going to a Uyghur prison camp, because we know Major League Baseball is such a tight money relationship with China right now. So that's,
hey, look, in China,
folks, that's just a joke.
There's zero doubt over the outcome of the election in China. So they have a system where everybody knows what's going to happen there.
All right, so let's talk about the bill that Republicans are staging a little rally on at the State House today. I think someone might have sent me a picture that I'll show later if I can find it. But just get quickly, if you don't mind spending a few more minutes, your thoughts on this. Well, first of all, let's stay with the All-Star game, and then we'll go. So Denver has lower percent minorities than Colorado and Denver than does Georgia. And has stricter voting standards than Georgia. Is that not true?
It is, with this exception. Okay. Colorado is a vote by mail state. Okay. So every registered voter gets mailed, not just an absentee ballot application, gets mailed an actual ballot. So that's, it's, and drop boxes, they have drop boxes all over the place.
So they have in-person voting though too, right?
But you get mailed your ballot and you can bring it in if you want to. But yeah, so I think, I think, Major League Baseball found a place that with an election system that liberals like.
Okay. Got it.
Yeah.
Got it. So there's no in-person machine voting. Just bring your ballot in and put it in the machine. Okay.
Yeah.
All right, very, very quickly, because we've extended, you've been very generous with your time, but in Rhode Island, yes or no, we have motor voter registration, where you have that in Georgia?
We do. Yes.
All right. They want to expand that to pretty much anything, you know, whether if you start getting welfare checks or you have any interaction with government, you will get registered to vote.
Yeah.
Mail ballots right now. We did mail applications to everybody in both the primary and in the general election. We used to require, like I said, 2 signatures and or a notary on the envelope on the return, but they did away with that. There's no requirement other than a signature. Your quick thoughts on that? They did that like you supposedly specially for the COVID reason, not to avoid interaction, but now they want to make that permanent. Thoughts?
I think that, look, the challenge, and I know Georgia's been criticized for switching away from signature verification, but it's very tricky. Okay. And just think about, you know, I think about my own signature, how it's changed over the years. It just happens. And what you're asking is for, you know, elections workers who look at these things to become, you know, handwriting experts, and it's very difficult.
1 hour of training isn't going to do it. That's what they got. We extended.
I mean, people, you know, law enforcement people devote their lives to trying to understand this. So it's a real science and very difficult for poll workers to do.
Yep. We extended to 20-day early voting. We have no excuse mail ballot voting. We also allow for same-day registration and voting.
Yeah.
Do you guys do that?
We do not do that. I know some states do, and I think.
Well, this is the new look they want. This is what they're proposing, I should say.
It's problematic.
Yeah. No, for obvious reasons.
Yeah.
They want to remove the 30-day residency requirement, where you would have had to have lived for 30 days. So, you know, that just opens the door. That makes it easier to cheat, right? We say easy to vote, hard to cheat. That makes it easy to vote, easy to cheat.
Yeah.
Ballot harvesting. Last comment.
Yeah.
What do you allow that in Georgia? We do not address it at all. So basically, it's legal because it's not illegal.
Our law was silent on that before, but this new bill outlaws that and describes what they mean by ballot harvesting.
Any exceptions?
Family
members or anything?
No.
Only you.
I may be wrong. I may be wrong about that. There may be some exceptions, but yeah, essentially, you should not be touching other people's ballots.
So, message to Rhode Islanders who are looking to do the opposite. You're looking to fix some of the problems and ensure it gets harder to cheat. We're trying to make it easier to vote and easier to cheat. Message to Rhode Islanders, and I thank you for your time.
Yeah, you know, I think the message is this: we have to strike a balance. We have to understand, you know, our history in the South is a little different. There is a history of discrimination and attempting to keep African Americans from voting. So we in Georgia have to be very sensitive to that.
Yes.
But we can strike a balance. You can have lots of access where that every citizen feels like they had the opportunity to vote. But it's equally important to have a system that people trust. I really worry about this, that we're heading to this place where no matter who the winner is, the losing side is going to think that that person got there by some sort of
have to trust
means.
The process at least, right?
Yep.
I agree. And that was my complaint. I had somebody from Common Cause Rhode Island on. I'm sure you have a counterpart down there, and who was backing this bill. And I challenged him. I said, why would you do something that you know, President Trump and Republicans get about 40% of the vote around here. Why would you do something that automatically is going to alienate 40% of the population? Why would you do that? You know, it's just so divisive. Buzz Brockway from Georgia Center for Opportunity, former state representative. Thank you for your time. Thank you for being a sport, playing along and in the dugout.
Absolutely.
Good luck to the Braves this year. I won't say good luck to Major League Baseball anymore, but I will say good luck to the Atlanta Braves. I'd like to see you do ballpark someday soon, and I look forward to hopefully meet you when I'm there. Buzz, thank you for your time.
Thanks, Mike. I appreciate it.
Take care. All right, folks. So there's the truth about what's going on in Georgia. I mean, it's nothing. It's literally nothing. I mean, listen, can we talk honestly? We're in the dugout. Can we talk like teammates here? What this is about is mail ballots. and mail ballot fraud. Georgia Republicans are trying to close the opportunity for fraud with mail ballots. We don't know whether mass fraud happened or not. That's not the point. We're not looking backwards at last election. There are obvious holes that anybody can exploit unless you start tightening up. If we're going to go to all these mail and digital in the future, there has to be tight rules. Everybody agrees, easy to vote, hard to cheat. And these rules they put in just made it a little bit harder to cheat. It will suppress nobody's right to vote. I don't believe that there are large numbers or even small numbers of people in Georgia who don't have an ID or who can't figure out how to find their ID number and put it on a mail ballot. That's the claim. I think that in and of itself is racist. It's certainly demeaning. And for that, all these corporations, Delta Airlines, Coca-Cola, Major League Baseball, and 20 others have made themselves look foolish. It's like the media is starting to realize that they've miscategorized this Georgia bill. Imagine you're a CEO who went out there on national, international TV making claims. And Joe Biden, the president of our country, making absolutely ignorant, false, uninformed claims and having all this result because of those false claims, that fake news. Folks, we got to end this fake news. It's ruling we're making decisions based on fake news, fake premises, fake narratives. The never land of make-believe. We are being governed by people who live in a never land of make-believe. Whether they really believe this crap or they're just fools, I don't know. But we're being dominated and governed by ideas that come out of the never land of make-believe, and it's got to stop. And that's my segue into our last segment, segue into a segment. So last night, I and one of our board members, former Associate Justice of the State Supreme Court here in Rhode Island, Judge Robert Flanders, former Judge Robert Flanders. Judge Flanders provided written testimony. I provided verbal testimony to a committee hearing organized by chairman of the Senate Oversight Committee, Senator Lou DePalma. He was one of the finalists for lieutenant governor. I've known the senator for a number of years. I wouldn't say we're really close, but we have a working relationship. And he invited me, called me, said, hey, we're having a hearing Monday. I know you guys have expressed some interest in this. Would you like to testify? If he didn't tell me, I wouldn't have known about it. So we did testify. And Judge Flanders put in some written testimony. Basically, Judge Flanders talked about the need to reform, to provide for more democratic emergency governance during these states of emergency. That this unilateral, unchecked powers that Rhode Island law gives to the executive branch and only gives the legislative branch the option to intercede. It doesn't require the General Assembly to validate, to rubber stamp, to approve, or it doesn't compel them to do anything. They can just sit back like they did and just let the executive branch rule or dictate, as I would say, and in a very inconsistent and arbitrary way, and sometimes in an unconstitutional way. And speaking of unconstitutional, so they had a main presenter, a lawyer from the executive branch. I think his name was Claire Richard or Richards. And she was talking about one senator asked her, did you guys make any mistakes? She goes, yeah, we made one mistake. It was probably unconstitutional. Now listen to what this one senator, Senator Stephen Archambault, said when the lawyer for the state's executive branch admitted that, one of those executive orders, which is the one that would have limited people coming from New York to Rhode Island. Remember that early on? But that was probably unconstitutional. Go ahead. Let's hear from Senator Archambault.
Mr. Chairman, if I may follow up, Claire, I appreciate that. That was a good example. And I, frankly, as unconstitutional as that was, I was a big fan of it. And I appreciate the fact that she put her, I'll say that again, as unconstitutional as it was, and the moment, I was a big fan of it under the public health and safety.
All right, Kent, all right, stop right there. Can you imagine that? A state senator sworn to uphold the Constitution of this country and this state is a big fan of an unconstitutional act. I didn't have this in my prepared remarks because obviously I didn't know who was going to say that, but here's how I responded during my, which was by phone, so there's no audio here. Here's how I responded.
You ready for second fight? So, at least last but not least.
This looks like the beginning of my testimony, Larry. You got to get to my comment on this.
Oh, gotcha, Sten. You know, I've spent some time at the State House. That may have been the dumbest thing I've ever heard up there. Not your commentary, his on that. So let's switch over to your commentary right now. Gotcha.
It's not a question. It's a response.
No.
No.
All right, that's fine. Anyway,
this is your commentary, Sten. If you want to, he just needs one more second to gear.
All right. That's the beginning. I didn't address it until a few minutes in, Larry.
Okay.
All right,
I don't have that time marked, Sten.
You're there?
Yeah. No, I don't have that time marked.
All right. It's at the 50:35 mark if you want to try it. If not, I'll just.
We're beyond that. You're going to have to.
All right. So anyway, I said I was appalled that any sitting senator would ever think it was appropriate to say he was a big fan of something that was unconstitutional. You see, this is the attitude they have up there. Well, I'm a conservative. I'm for low taxes. I'm not for distribution of wealth. I'm not a socialist, but I'm okay with this socialist policy because it was a special circumstance. I'm okay with an unconstitutional thing because we're in a pandemic. Now, Judge Flanders, it wasn't in his written testimony, but he said it publicly on this show first, months ago. There is no pandemic exception to the Constitution. The Constitution rules in all circumstances. You honor the Constitution and you work around its not to go around them per se, but you have to work within the framework, no matter. As soon as we start making excuses to violate a constitution, to infringe on rights, to infringe on principles, then it's not worth having those rights or principles in paper. It's not worth the paper it's on. This is the problem. Everybody up there thinks that their exception is always the justifiable one. Our state has been ruled by exceptions to free markets, to constitutional rights, to parental rights, to tax, to pro business tax. They always have an excuse or a reason why they will violate one of those principles or rights. As you will hear, Larry, if you have it queued up, as you will hear how Senator Archambault responded after I finished my testimony.
It's not a question, it's a response. And I stand by my assertion earlier declared that the public health and safety welfare of our state clearly outweighed any argument of constitutionality in the moment, irrespective of whether that ultimately would have been found unconstitutional. And I disagree with the assertion of Mr. Stenhouse that our executive orders aren't valid under the scope and powers of the governor's authority as the executive branch without having a vigorous debate on each order.
All right, that's good there, Larry. So,
Stan, I take it back. That second statement was the dumbest statement I've ever heard at the State House.
2 points there. First, he doubled down on being a big fan of unconstitutional executive orders. I mean, just think about that. that this is the prevailing attitude up there. This is why our state is last in business climate, first into a recession, last out, because we've always made these exceptions. They've always been sold. I mean, it's just an absurd declaration by the senator. He then commented, the gist of my debate is that not only is legislative oversight of executive orders and important just because it's a balance of power, which is the proper way to run our state, a balance of power between the executive, legislative, and judicial branches. That argument was made by a prior witness and by Judge Flanders. My argument was that along with that oversight, along with that decision as to whether or not an executive order can be extended beyond the initial 30 days, and that must require General Assembly approval or not, that just that process of that approval or not requires vigorous and transparent debate in committee or on the floors of the House or Senate, debates that are important for the people to hear. I mean, how many of us had so little faith in the executive orders that kept coming down from Raimondo and now continue under McKee, when we had no idea what the motivation was behind it, whether it was constitutional or not? There was no public debate on that. We were told it was based on the science, but they never told us what science. And when the media ever asked them what science, they just brushed the question aside. We were basically just being dictated to. It was not a democratic process. The debate, the open, transparent debate, which is what our center is all about, was the most vital point I stressed during my verbal testimony. And if you go to rifreedom.org, by the way, you can read, if you go to our website, I'll share this here with you. Right at the top here, Flanders Stenhouse provide testimony calling for an end to unchecked executive branch emergency powers. You can, there is a link to the judge's written testimony and to the Capitol TV, my verbal testimony. So you can see all that. But the gist of my testimony was that the public, in order to have faith, just like you heard our prior guest from Georgia say, the public needs to have faith in the election process. We also need to have faith in this emergency executive order process, which is supposed to be subject to a check and balance from the legislative branch. And you heard a senator again say, no, we don't need public debate. That's overblown. Who the hell cares about the little peon people? I will just be a sheeple. I will do whatever the governor says, whether it's unconstitutional, whether the people know why we're doing it or not. We don't need debate. We don't even need our legislative branch to exercise its authority. We're just going to give away and cede control to the governor like little obey, yes, ma'am, yes, sir, whatever you say, sheeple. What the hell is going on out there? Do you realize how perverted those two attitudes are? Do you have any understanding that what you heard from Senator Archambault is exactly what's wrong with the majority of the lawmakers up there on Smith Hill? That's exactly the problem. I mean, you can't find a better example. It's unbelievable. And only one person on the committee, during the testimony, one other question that was pretty innocuous from one other committee member, and then only one committee member, and that was Senator Jessica De La Cruz, who we had on this show. She was the only one that spoke out in support of the reforms that I and the prior witness were advocating for, reforms that would necessarily require the General Assembly to authorize or not extensions of original executive orders under emergency powers statutes. We're supposed to have balanced government. we're supposed to have constitutional government. But you heard that senator pretty much represent what I think is probably the view of most in the General Assembly. They don't care about constitutional government. They don't care about balance of government. And they certainly express that they don't care about you and me and us having access to hear the debates that go on that justify these executive orders that have had such impacts on so many people in our state. People have lost jobs. People have lost businesses. People have fled the states. People are dying because of depression and loneliness and drug overdoses. Students are failing to learn. All because executive orders went unchallenged by anybody else in government. There was no check and balance. Our rights were trampled unconstitutionally, and yet that senator, Senator Stephen Archambault, says that's okay because it was all for a good reason. No, as Judge Flanders said, there is no pandemic exception to the Constitution. I'm really exercised over this, as you can tell, because if that is it, that's the attitude that's up there. They know best. They know when it's okay to trample your rights. They know it's an okay to put somebody else's interests ahead of yours. Baloney. They don't. Okay, tomorrow, again, another big show. We have North Kingston and South County parents who are outraged that their kids are being violated with unproven tests, experimental tests. They even call their kids guinea pigs in order to play sports, school sports. You'll hear about that. And then the bottom of the hour, I think it's going to be a really emotional time with my counterpart from Colorado, who will talk about his personal experience with the Colorado shootings from a few weeks ago, and also with some lawsuits that he's involved with defending Second Amendment rights. So that's tomorrow in the Dugout. And I thank you for watching today. Mike Stenos.